Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Husker Big Red Podcast. We are coming at you on Friday morning. It's ahead of a huge visit weekend for Nebraska football. We'll be previewing that, talking about some spring football rumblings and everything else that is related to the Huskers. So we'll get started here. Danny, how you doing on this Friday morning before a huge recruiting weekend for Nebraska?
It's nice to have a busy week with the spring ball news and obviously this big recruiting weekend. It makes it a little more fun to write about all this stuff. And, for the first time in a long time, it doesn't seem like a lot of bad news. It seems like good news and it seems like exciting stuff. So that's exactly what we want to write about and, hear about. And, yeah, like you kind of alluded to, it starts this weekend.
Yeah, we've been talking about this visit weekend for quite a while. The Huskers have been building towards it, kind of their big junior day. They've got 26, recruits coming in for spring visits this weekend. Dylan Raiola, the number one quarterback, the number one player in the 2024 class, according to the 24 sports composite rankings. He's going to be on campus. A number of other top 100 recruits, three of the best, in-state recruits are going to be on campus this weekend. So it really is a huge opportunity for Nebraska. So what are you watching for this weekend, Danny? I'm sure everybody's, attention's going to be on Dylan Raiola. Is that, what your focus is on going into this weekend?
No, my focus is on the other, recruits. You know, Galen Bear is going to be in town, and he spoke highly of Nebraska earlier this week. And you mentioned Brandon Baker. I think Isaiah McMorris is coming. We got Carter Nelson. It's a who's who of recruiting for Nebraska football this weekend, and I'm interested to see who commits this weekend. I don't think it's going to be a massive amount of commitments, although I definitely would not hate that. But I do expect maybe one or two. But I do think, what will happen is, these recruits will get to see all at once, you know, what Nebraska is about, and seeing that together as a group, they may be able to envision themselves, being on campus and contributing for this program a little bit better. And a lot of conversations are going to happen this weekend between the players, and I would love to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, people need to not get too obsessed with, how many commitments I think Nebraska's going to get this weekend, because it is more of a precursor with a lot of these guys, getting them on campus, and the kind of the focus is going to be getting some of them back for official visits in June. But there are a few guys I think that could commit. One guy we've talked about, or I've talked about, is Ian Flint, tight end from Texas. He's got family ties to Nebraska. He's visited here before, and this would be another visit. Gibson Pyle is another guy that Nebraska's gotten a lot of, projections for, offensive lineman out of Texas. So those are two guys, I could potentially see, pulling the trigger. You just never really know. It depends how things go with recruitments. But yeah, definitely, Gatlin Bear is a guy, to keep an eye on, I think. And Carter Nelson is a huge, this is a big opportunity for Nebraska here to get a visit. And then, of course,
Isaiah
Dylan.
McMorris.
Yeah, Isaiah McMorris. Yeah, another, in-state guy. Caleb Benning is another guy that's on campus that, they need to try to make some positive steps with. But I mean, to me, yeah, it's definitely, I'm really centered in on Dylan Raiola, because things have definitely been happening, in his recruitment. He just visited Georgia last weekend, and I'm not sure if you saw this, but he does have an official visit set up with the Bulldogs now for June. That's the only one that he's scheduled. And Dominic Raiola was, said they the Raiolas had visited for a sixth time. The visit went great. It always, kind of exceeds expectations. So Georgia, what people thought they were kind of waning out, I think they've definitely, surged again with this visit, and they've got, that official visit set up now. So I don't know, how worried are you about, the Bulldogs again in the Raiola recruitment?
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not overly worried. I think, this is an opportunity for a player of Rayola's caliber um to kind of just take as many visits as he can and see what's out there. And to be completely honest with you, as much as I would love Dylan Raiola, with the amount of talent that we have on campus this weekend, I w- I would love to make equally as good an impression on, the other recruits as well, because y- you know, it's kind of, we obviously all want Dylan Raiola, but if you can get, even an above average quarterback, but surround him with playmakers, then that could obviously put your program in a good spot for success as well. So while I think Raiola is definitely important, and while I want him, I do think it's important for Nebraska to make a good impression on guys like McMorris and Bear and Carter Nelson and things like that as well. The only thing I do worry about is if Raiola commits, how many of these guys will follow. But you know, when that happens, that happens, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But you know, I'm just I would fully expect him to take as many visits as he can before he makes a decision, and I still like Nebraska in terms of where they stand in his recruitment.
Yeah, we'll see. They need to make some progress this weekend because, USC, when he had his visit, they had, a lot of buzz coming out of there. And Georgia has, a big visit, and they've got an official visit set up, which I've always said is going to, the official visits and all that are going to just determine this recruitment. um so yeah, it's gonna be an important weekend, I think, because for one, with some of these kids that are coming, I don't think that there's, like Ryan Wingo. I don't think even if Nebraska gets Dylan Raiola, they have a very good shot at him. But if they don't get Dylan Raiola, I don't think they have any shot at Ryan Wingo. And like Williams Noir, like I'm not even excited about him that much because I just don't think Nebraska has a shot for him. I think he's going to Oklahoma, and you know what I mean. Like there's some guys on this list that Nebraska's, Brandon Baker. I think Nebraska has really no shot at getting him. I mean, to be honest, it would be great just to get into his, top five, and it's smart to run the race. But some of these guys, like the offer sheets and stuff, I just really don't see some of these guys, coming back and giving Nebraska a lot of chance. Gatlin Bear, I think, is a guy that Nebraska does have a legitimate shot with. Michigan's a team to watch there as well. They've got a lot
Hmm.
of Idaho players in recent years, but Andrew Sprague is a guy that I do think Nebraska can
Yeah.
get, and he's going to be on campus this weekend. So that's going to be a big one. And yeah, Carter Nelson obviously is a huge guy too, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I do think they need to try to create some positive momentum with Raiola, just because they've gone with this approach of that's basically the only quarterback they're recruiting at this point. So if they don't get him, they're really putting themselves in a tough spot. And I know that things are kind of moving up with Stone Saunders in 2025, but I really don't think you can go two classes without a quarterback. I know Jeff Sims has 3 years, to play, depending on what kind of happens this year. But look, if Jeff Sims ends up being the starter this year, then you've only got one more year with him. So I really think they've got to hone in on this quarterback position and get one in this class. And I really hope it's Raiola. And I think this weekend will kind of go a long way in determining how that factors into everything, plus the spring game. And like we've said before, Nebraska doesn't really have the body of evidence or the body of work it can show. So these visits, I think, are really important in the recruitment of Dylan Raiola.
I'll just say I'm preparing to not land Raiola. I mean, I'm not trying to get too over the moon about landing him. If we do, I'll be ecstatic. You'll see me bouncing out of my chair here if we do the next podcast. But I am fully preparing to not land him. With that being said, I do think that Nebraska needs to land some form of a quarterback within the next cycle, because while we have good quarterback depth now, we're not going to have it, even a year from now or 2 years from now. So, but I don't think that Matt Rule's quarterback depth and Scott Frost's quarterback depth, for example, I think there's two different levels. I don't think Rule's going to put some shoddy kind of quarterback room together and call it a day. I think he will find a talented athlete. It's just a question of making sure you land him, because with the type of caliber of athlete and quarterback even that Rule is recruiting, other teams are going to want him too.
Yeah, and the other thing, I mean, there is going to be more options in the transfer portal too. I mean, even this spring, there's quarterback competitions at Georgia, at Alabama, at Ohio State. I mean, there's going to be, coming out of that, there's going to be guys that hit the transfer portal that
Oh
were
yeah.
former top 100 kids, and so that's not saying Nebraska's going to target any of those guys. I'm just saying over the course, the transfer portal is a very viable option for starting quarterbacks, but at some point they need to get that development in house. And I do think part of it depends too is, like if Heinrich Harburg, if he is developing and making positive steps, then you might feel a little bit better about your long-term health of the quarterback room. Ricardo Torres would be another, one of those guys who, has a lot of eligibility left. Who, if you could look at him this spring and say, hey, maybe this is a guy who could start in 2 years, then you don't feel quite as rushed to add a 2024 quarterback. So I mean, I agree, it's not going to be the same type of depth chart, but and look, even if they don't get Raiola, they can circle around and get guys pretty quickly, and I still think they'll circle back to Daniel Kalen. It's not like,
Yeah.
I mean, Missouri's Missouri. I'm not trying to insult Missouri or anything, but I mean, that's still a flippable commitment in my opinion if it works out that way.
Missouri also, as a state, has a lot of talented athletes coming up. So
They do, yeah.
that's something to watch for too. I mean, one commitment here, another commitment there. All of a sudden, you have a pretty nice, I don't know, defensive back room or wide receiver room. So, but I think, Heinrich Harburg talked earlier this week about being open to a potential position change. So I'm wondering if anything's going to happen there, and if that lets Richard Torres kind of, slide up and become, more involved in the quarterback room, because we still have Logan Smothers and guys like that. So, I mean, it's also been a while since these quarterbacks, if at all, have played with a good offensive line. So that will be interesting to me as well down the road. See what a guy like Smothers can do behind a good offensive line, because he hasn't really had one in a while. Nebraska hasn't really had one in, I don't know, 3 years. So there's a lot of different options we can go to at quarterback. You know, I obviously really want Dylan Raiola, but I'm mentally preparing that he's not going to be there, and we're going to have to, kind of deal with the situation where we get playmakers around a quarterback and take, I hate using lesser known talent, but take a guy that's maybe a little bit less skilled than Raiola and build on him from there, which I would be fine with. Honestly, I would be fine with, but at this point, I think um, Nebraska, like I said, is still very much in with Raiola, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will. I think, this weekend will be a positive. Get him back for the spring game, and then, try to get him for, an official visit in June. That's, I've always said, he's going to make his decision, late June, July, or whatever. So they've got time. But yeah, Georgia does worry me. I've always thought that they were the biggest. I've always been more worried about them than USC, just with the quarterback situation and all that. But at any rate, I mean, Stone Saunders, things are pushing up there, and there's a lot of other important recruits to watch this weekend, and it's interesting to see. You've got guys from Pennsylvania, from California, from a bunch of guys from Texas, in-state guys, from Kansas. So I mean, it's really the way that they're kind of putting this together, and putting together their kind of recruiting footprint, I think has been really smart. I've been really impressed with just the way that Matt Rule attacks it, just the way that he attacks everything. I liked how he suspended guys this week for not following the rules, Anthony Grant and Tommy Hill. It's just those little things, right? It was all those little things that Scott Frost just was too inattentive to care about, and that's why Nebraska constantly lost games that it should have probably won.
Absolutely, and hopefully Grant can get his situation straightened out. But you look at the running back room, and a guy like AJ Allen, Gabe Irvin was talked up by Matt Rule this week. So it's not going to be Anthony Grant's job to just coast and he'll be RB1. No, there's going to be guys ready to play behind him, and I really hope, I'm not wishing ill on him or anything. I really hope he can get his situation sorted out, but the depth is very much there, and the depth will be ready to take the top running back spot, whoever it may be. So, I mean, I'm going to be really interested to see what happens in the running back room. And I liked, and I wrote about this yesterday on Husker Big Red, that Marcus Satterfield was talking about a kind of positionless offense. We'll have three tight ends, possibly, a good running game. We're going to be physical, and I'm curious to see like how that plays out. But I do like the idea of that, because too many times in the Frost era, I thought we didn't put our best players on the field. And with the way that Satterfield was talking, now it sounds like Nebraska will maybe be able to do that. And I mean, the tight end room alone, with Fedoni and Gilbert, I mean, you want those two guys on the field at the same time as often as possible, because that could be some matchup nightmares. Ugh.
Yeah, both of those guys have looked, good so far
Yeah,
this spring. Not that we've seen a whole lot, but just from, what we've talked about from observers. Fedoni's still a little bit limited this spring.
they look big. I'll tell you that they look big.
Yeah, Gilbert especially looks massive. I mean, he like Fedoni looks like, a Greek god, but
Yeah,
Gilbert just looks like bouncer
grown
or
man,
something. I mean,
grown
good
man.
lord.
Yeah,
Not somebody you'd want to run into in a
no,
dark alley. But
no.
but nimble. And yeah, I think Marcus Satterfield used the word freak. I mean, in a good way, yesterday about Gilbert. So yeah, that's going to be exciting. And I think an exciting development is Gabe Urban, kind of the forgotten man. The Buford. He's a Buford, Georgia running back, and that's a big time program. And he had some moments, but he has been kind of singled out by Matt Rule. And yeah, will be interesting to see where he kind of fits into the mix. But it'll be good to have another back there. And we kind of maybe discounted him a little bit when looking at that number 3, or even maybe even more. Could be a number 2 or even the starter. Who knows? Everybody's kind of getting a fresh start under Matt Rule. And I do think Anthony Grant will hopefully be back soon. We already saw Tommy Hill, back. So I mean, it doesn't seem like a huge deal, but I think it's more of a, hey, I don't care if you're a starter. I don't
Yeah,
care if you're who you are. If you don't follow the rules, you're going to sit your ass on the bench. And I think that that's a great message. And that's the kind of thing that this program needs.
and I was watching some highlights of Irvin's game against Illinois in the opener in 2021, and he just put his head down. He was, like you said earlier on our Facebook page, a battering ram. He really just put his head down and ran physically, and even when there wasn't, a ton of running room, which there never was because our offensive line was terrible. He just kind of made the most of each run. He just put his head down and shouldered the defender over and tried his best. So I had forgotten how physical he was, and if we can get the Gabe Irvin of 2021 and fully healthy and ready to go, because even he admitted he wasn't really as explosive as he was due to his injury. If we can get the 2021 Gabe Irvin back, then that's a big development for the running back room, and would be able to complement the shifty, speedy AJ Allen, for example, very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of, well, the running back room, another guy just kind of came to my head. But speaking of spring ball impressions, Josh Fleeks is a guy that got some mention from Sean Callahan today, and Billy Kemp's been in the mix. I mean, Billy
Mhm.
Kemp looks sweet in his Nebraska uniform. So,
Mhm.
beyond that, but Xavier Betts, he's had some highlights out there. So I think the receiver room is kind of coming along nicely. What are some of the, of all the different kind of media or coaches talking, what are some of your takeaways or just general impressions so far of Nebraska spring football?
I feel like this spring football is very organized. I feel like each coach has a purpose with what they're trying to do, and I feel like each position group is kind of rejuvenated a little bit. That's what I took away from it. I remember, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said earlier this week, we're no longer being babied, and I think that's a huge thing, especially to start off in practice. And I don't feel a sense of, will this work out? I feel like this coaching staff is very, in line with what each other wants to do. I feel like Satterfield's offensive style fits the Big Ten very well. I feel like, Matt Rule has a pretty good grasp on, what he wants his team to do. And I only say pretty good because, we just started, 4.5 days ago. So I just feel like this team is very much, they have an identity, and that's to play physical, to play tough, and the coaching staff, all of them are buying in to that message. Because there were times last year when I felt like, each coach had their own individual goal, and that didn't work out so well.
Yeah, I definitely think Matt Rule is, and obviously your culture, everybody seems like they have a great culture in the spring and like in fall camp. Your culture gets tested in October when you lose when you're sitting with 1-3 or whatever, you know what I mean? And that's when things always fell apart, under Scott Frost in Nebraska. But yeah, it's just the difference in just the way that he's prepared and he's meticulous. They do so many things for a reason. I mean, they had Jeff Sims throwing with a smaller football the other day to try to work on his accuracy and his interceptions. Just little different little things that I feel like Matt Rule has picked up over the years and knows how to win. And that's the thing is, yes, he struggled with the Carolina Panthers in the NFL, but winning in the NFL for one is not easy, especially if you don't have a quarterback, and he never did. So, I mean, I feel like looking back at what he did at Temple and at Baylor, I mean, he knows how to build a winning college football program, and I feel like he's confident in that. I feel like he's confident in himself at this level. He knows
Yeah.
that he because he understands how to, it's not so dependent on, one or two guys, because look, it's not like, I mean, you're a Patriots fan. I like the Patriots. It's not like Bill Belichick doesn't know how to coach football, right? I mean, and the Patriots, they've kind of sucked since Tom Brady left, because if
Mhm.
you don't have a good quarterback, now look, if Bill Belichick wasn't their coach, they probably would have put together like, a bunch of 3 or 4 win seasons. You know what I mean? So I still think that people are kind of underrating the job that he's done there. But the point is, in the NFL, if you don't have the Billies and the Joes, the X's and the O's
Mhm.
really don't matter that much. And so that's why with like Matt Rule, people want to say, oh, he's a crappy coach because the NFL. No, he's not. He's a great coach, and I think we're going to see that. And it's just impressive, just the machine aspect of it. I mean, it's like Nebraska football right now is a well-oiled machine. And under Scott Frost, it was always a clunky son of a bitch that never wanted to work.
Yeah, and no, that just got me thinking. Honestly, what's the deal with Aaron Rodgers? Off topic a little bit, but is he going to New York? Is he staying in Green Bay? What's the deal?
I don't know. I think the Packers are holding out for a little more trade compensation. So, I mean, I think he's going to end up in New York, but we'll see. It's going to take a little while. It's kind of a hard situation
Yeah,
because I think the thing about it is the Packers are, I think the Packers have more leverage than the Jets, because I mean, who else are the Jets going to get right now? I mean, yeah, I guess Lamar Jackson's out there, but they haven't really expressed much interest. So it's kind of like, if you don't, you already went and signed guys that Aaron Rodgers wants to play
I
with. So it's
know.
like, what do you?
At
I
this
mean,
point, I just hope he's gonna get out of Green Bay for you guys as soon as possible, because boy, is he a headache. But anyway,
yeah.
I think from what I've heard, and the talk with Coach Osborne and Trev last week was a good one. I feel like he not only understands the game of football, meaning rule, but I feel like he understands what it means to this state and what it means to Lincoln and all the surrounding towns. Scott Frost obviously played for the program, and it would have been easy to say, "Oh, Frost gets a 2," but I don't think he understood the level of work that, it required to be successful, and obviously, we'll have to wait and see, what Rule does on the field, but I feel like he has a lunch pail type of attitude that really kinda meshes well with the fan base and the community as well, and I think that's something that's really been noticeable, at least in all the interviews I've seen.
Definitely. He's a good face for the program. He's a good leader, and I think
Mm.
he's going to make Nebraska football fans proud, the whole state of Nebraska proud. But yeah, one thing not to get too far off on a tangent, I did want to come back to, something I read this morning, which I found kind of interesting in the spring ball, is that Sean Callahan was saying that Malcolm Hartzog might be a safety this year. And I know Tony White, when he did his press conference, he talked about him standing out, and he was at nickel, and he mentioned him at safety and corner. And I don't know. I'm not sure what I think about that, because I mean, he was one of our better corners last year. I mean, so what are your thoughts on him being more of a safety? I felt pretty good about our safety position.
He has the athleticism to be a safety because you saw his punt block against, I believe it was it Rutgers? I, if I remember correctly, I think he had
Indiana,
two
that was
actually.
Indiana. He might
Indiana,
add
that's what it
two.
was.
Indiana,
And
he ran it back in, I'm pretty sure,
yeah,
for a
yeah, yeah. That's
touchdown.
that's exactly what it was. And you know, I don't mind it because I think he has the athleticism for it. Our safety position is loaded, so that makes me wonder, who may move and who will stay in terms of that position. But I think as much as we're going to see a positionless offense, I think this defense allows itself to be positionless as well, in the sense that you want a guy like Chief Borders, coming up, into the box and making plays, but he can also offer a bit of coverage here and there. I think there's a lot of opportunities to mix and match, and I think Nebraska has athletes on defense and not just, oh, this guy can play this position and so forth. So it's definitely interesting because I did think he was one of our better corners, but I definitely trust Tony White to, put them in positions to succeed because I feel like, this defense allows for, the athleticism to shine a little bit more in addition to the scheme. So,
Yeah, it will be interesting. I mean, the first my first thought on it strikes me that Malcolm Hartzog is a little small to be a safety, but I mean that's not. There's been other guys that have been small and played that position before. I'm weight wise, he doesn't, but that's I'm sure he'll add some weight. And from what I can remember, he was a pretty solid tackler last year. I think he's definitely has great ball skills. I could see him, doing that. And look, every team uses their safeties different. Just because they call him a safety doesn't mean that could mean he's more of a nickel back that's kind of in the slot, moving around, doing different things. I don't know that. And look, maybe he will be in the deep middle at times, and he can use his vision and his athleticism to kind of, cover up things. I mean, I do like Buford and Farmer, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Nebraska ended up playing, three safeties, because that's, to me, look, even going into spring, when I was looking at the defensive depth chart and stuff, quarterback depth is not great for Nebraska right now. I mean, they've got some guys. I'm not saying they don't have, but they don't have a lot of. I mean, after Newsom and Hartzog, and I guess it kind of depends too on Tommy Hill. I think he's going to be over there, and maybe he can get his head on straight, and that will kind of lock some things down. But there's not a lot of you can look at almost every position on the defense, and there's D line, there's some depth, but cornerback after you get to that starting lineup. I mean, and with Hartzog, there's not a lot beyond that. Braxton Clark, Tommy Hill. I know there was a walk on that kind of got mentioned. I'm blanking on the name right now by Tony White, but yeah, it's kind of interesting just because the depth doesn't really seem to be there at cornerback.
well, I think you're going to see a lot of mixing and matching. I think, you may not see the specific label of corner, but I think guys will probably be able to rotate and, play corner in certain schemes. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I like it because, like I said with the offense earlier, it allows for some of the best athletes to be on the field, multiple of, the best athletes on the defensive side to be on the field. So it's definitely one of the more unorthodox approaches, but I definitely, am excited to see it just because, Hartzog and Buford, they were our, some of our shining stars defensively last season, and they were, freshmen. So I'm excited to see what they can do in year two.
Yeah, definitely. And look, some more guys are going to get, on campus too. I mean, that's another thing is Nebraska does have a number of, freshman cornerbacks coming in that can potentially, contribute. And look, there's going to be another transfer portal window too, and that's,
Mm,
potentially where, you could see more cornerbacks. I think personally, I think we're going to see a lot of quarterbacks, in that trans. Not a ton, but like in some of these places I've talked about, with the quarterback competition. I mean, even at Nebraska. I mean, if you're sitting here like, if you're Logan Smothers and you're pretty sure you're like fifth on the depth chart, I mean, you might consider it if you have a chance to play,
yeah.
somewhere else. And I just think like Georgia's going to have a I feel like there's going to be a kid from Georgia that's going to hit the portal, and he'll probably go to like Auburn or something. But it's just going to be interesting because there's going to be guys that don't see that opportunity where they're at after spring, and then they're going to hit the portal, and that's where I think Nebraska can hopefully find another defensive back if they feel they need it, and I think they could use more tackle depth on the offensive line and another pass rusher. But what do I know?
So this is interesting because you mentioned, the transfer portal, and Micah Mizuka entered the transfer portal after committing to Florida. I believe it's due to a medical reason, and so he's going to be out for a little bit of time. But would you take a flyer on him just as a kind of, you know, get him into the program, wait and see what he can do, and then once he's healthy, maybe put him on the line?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what the medical issue was. Did he get hurt? Do you know, or what?
No, I
What?
just saw a medical issue. I didn't see.
Okay. So I mean, yeah, I guess I would, I think it would be worth checking out. I'm assuming he's going to be entering the transfer portal, or is he already?
Yeah, he was going to re-enter the transfer portal as of 13 hours ago.
So yeah, I mean, I think I would. I mean, Nebraska was definitely interested before, and Matt Rule, I believe, recruited him. I think he went to Baylor after Matt Rule left, but he was part of recruiting him. So yeah, I definitely would take a flyer on him. At least have him come in for a visit. You can see what's up with the medical stuff, and bring him in. And I mean, if it's not something that's going to prevent him from playing, I mean, long term, I think he would be a solid addition to the offensive line, and any kind of experience I think he can bring would be a good thing.
Yeah, because I thought honestly we were gonna land him initially, but
Hmm.
I think as long as he's healthy and as long as he can, and if he's not healthy, as long as he can heal up nicely, I think he wouldn't be bad to bring in. Offensive line depth is always a good thing, and as we've talked about, many times before, offensive line is an area where this coaching staff is particularly strong in. So I wouldn't mind bringing him in at all. I would kind of be wary of it if he takes up a, scholarship or a roster spot of some sort immediately, just because we don't know the timeline on, when he'll be fully ready to go. But I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on him at all. It kind of makes me glad in a way that we didn't land him initially because, where would he be now in terms of just trying to heal up?
Yeah, and it is, Nebraska could use more offensive linemen because Sean Callahan pointed this out too, that they've only got 10 scholarship offensive linemen right now, which is a pretty low number for a Division 1 program. I know they've got a bunch of freshmen coming in, so it's not going to be that. I mean, it's going to be. I think they've got like 4 freshman offensive linemen off the top of my head, at least. I know there's one on campus now, but it was a pretty big class. So I mean, they're going to be up more 14 or 15, and I really would just love to get a guy. I'm not saying he has to be the starter at right or left tackle, but I would just love to get another player here that has Power Five like starting experience. I'm still missing Walter Rouse, from Stanford. Still burned by that one.
Honestly, I'm not, because if you're gonna pull that shit and switch, a day after committing or whatever, good riddance. You're probably gonna switch 75,000 times in your college career. I wouldn't trust a guy like that. I really wouldn't. I mean, he does have a lot of talent, but uh, I mean, I don't know. The whole thing seemed like crazy to me. I mean, he must have gotten better money. I know I remember we talked about it at the time. He must have gotten better money or a good NIL deal or something. But I mean, if you're gonna flip that quickly, I mean, I don't know if I really want you in my program, regardless of talent.
Yeah, I get. He says it wasn't NIL. He said something about coach. I'm not sure exactly, but I just know he's got like 30 some starts at left tackle under his belt, and
I
it would have
know,
been
I know.
would have been an upgrade. But at any rate, I'm hoping that they can find somebody there that's got some experience. So if there's injuries, there's just not enough depth right now, frankly. And we've seen this before. It's hard to get through the season with your top
Mm.
5 guys, and you know on the interior, there's some guys like Leftovsky, Ethan. I feel pretty good about the depth there. But I mean, if one of these guys goes down, I mean, you're looking at maybe throwing in one of these freshmen or, another younger recruit we haven't really heard about. So, I really feel strongly they need to, kind of scour that spring transfer window for another offensive tackle.
And I feel good about a guy like Ethan Piper. I really do. I mean, I
Hmm.
feel like
I
he
think he could
play.
start this year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He played well last season, I thought, and he's been one of their more solid linemen. So I feel good about Piper and Latovsky, and I feel better about the offensive line than I did last season. But I'd still like to see just a little bit more reassurance at the position, and then I'll be good to go. Maybe some more defensive line help, like you said, but overall, I'm liking the way the roster looks right now.
Yeah, and one thing I thought that was interesting when you brought up Piper is he was mentioned, or it was mentioned, and I think it was by him actually when he did, because he did a presser. He's working at all 3 interior positions, center and both guard spots, and I think that's somewhat interesting because he did start at guard last year, and I thought he was a solid player. I wouldn't have a
Hmm.
problem
Yeah.
with him starting again, but if if, say, for instance, Nebraska looks at his tackle depth and it's like, like Ben Hart's not improving. So maybe, they got to move Scott.
week one,
Yeah.
Ethan Piper suddenly moved to tackle.
Well, no, I'm saying,
I
but
mean,
I'm saying, Ethan, what if Ethan Piper moves to center
center.
and they can work that out, and then Ben Scott, who's played and started games at tackle, moves out because he's like 6'5". I mean, he looks like a tackle. I mean, maybe I just think that at least by having that opportunity, it sets up Nebraska to, put their best 5 guys out there, however that looks.
I'm sorry, Bryce. I really am. I want you to succeed, but you just drove me crazy last season, and I'm hoping you have the best redemption story in Nebraska football history, and you make me eat my words. I really hope you succeed, and I want the best for you. If you see this, I just you don't even get out of the snap on a field goal. Like, come on now.
Yeah, hopefully hopefully this next year will be better. So I think it seems like a good time to wrap it up there. So make sure, guys, if you're a Nebraska football fan, if you're a fan of Husker basketball or whatever, make sure you hit the subscribe
A lot of
button.
transfer portal news there too.
Yep.
A lot of contacts, a lot of reaching out. So we'll see. Some good players too.
Yeah, and if I'm guessing maybe if you check out Husker.com, you might even see an article, or HuskerBigRed.com, for cripe's sake. You might even see and a transfer portal article in the next couple of days. So, at any rate, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button, and let us know what you think about this recruiting weekend, or some of your impressions about spring, or even if you would like to see us cover some different topics about Nebraska in the coming weeks. So, we kind of have a more open schedule with spring ball and, no basketball or anything. Baseball's going. Women's basketball just ended last night with a loss in the NIT to Kansas. So
A
screw you,
strong
Kansas.
season, though. A strong season, all things considered.
It was just Kansas. Kansas will out. They'll always just. I hate it. I hate
Yeah,
them in basketball. They always
men and
fuck up.
women. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, but it was a good season for Amy Williams and those guys, and feel good about where the baseball team is headed. So,
Mm-hmm.
we'll have some more updates on that, and check out HuskerBigRed.com all weekend because there's going to be a lot of recruiting news,
Yeah.
more stuff about spring ball. So, we'll be back on Monday to wrap it all up, and check out the website, hit that subscribe button. And for both of us here, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.